My father suspended me until I apologized to my sister. I just said, "All right." The next morning, she smirked until she saw my empty desk and resignation letter. The company lawyer ran in pale. "Tell me you didn't post it." My father's smile died on the spot. I still remember the exact moment my father chose Madison over me for the 100th time. We were standing in his corner office with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago, and he had just finished listening to her theatrical performance about how I deliberately undermined her authority in front of the entire sales team. The truth. I corrected a massive error in her quarterly projections that would have cost Sterling and Associates nearly $3 million, but Madison had a gift for spinning narratives, and our father had never been immune to her tears. "Allison, you're suspended without pay until you apologize to your sister," he said, not even looking up from the papers on his desk. His voice carried that distant corporate tone he used when he wanted to pretend this was about business rather than family. I'd spent 6 years building the analytics department from scratch. Every major client we'd landed in the pharmaceutical sector came through relationships I'd cultivated. The proprietary algorithm I developed for predicting market trends had become the company's most valuable asset, generating 40% of our annual revenue. None of that seemed to matter. Madison stood behind him, arms crossed, her perfectly manicured nails strumming against her blazer sleeve. She was 3 years younger than my 29, but you'd never know it from the way she carried herself around the office. Daddy's favorite had always enjoyed special privileges. "All right," I said simply. My father's head snapped up clearly, expecting an argument. Madison's smirk faltered for just a second. They'd both grown accustomed to my protests over the years, my carefully constructed logical arguments about fairness and merit. This time, I offered nothing but calm agreement. I walked out of that office and went straight to my apartment in Lincoln Park. The view of the city from my living room had always calmed me, but that evening I barely noticed it. Instead, I opened my laptop and started making calls. First was Rebecca Chen, my mentor from graduate school, who now ran operations at Thornton Analytics, our biggest competitor. We'd stayed close over the years, meeting for coffee every few months to discuss industry trends. She'd been trying to recruit me for the past 2 years. "Rebecca, do you still have that offer on the table?" I asked. Her response was immediate. "For you always." What changed? Everything I said. But I need to move fast, and I need it to be completely confidential until I'm ready. "Done. Send me your updated portfolio tonight. We'll have contracts ready by tomorrow afternoon." Next, I called Marcus Webb, the intellectual property attorney I'd consulted 6 months ago when I first started suspecting Madison was trying to take credit for my work. He'd advised me to start documenting everything separating my personal innovations from company property. Marcus remembered that conversation we had about protecting my proprietary work. Every word he replied. "Are we moving forward?" "We are. I need to know exactly what I can take with me and what stays with Sterling." He talked me through the details. The algorithm I developed, the foundational work, had been done on my personal time using my own equipment before I'd even presented the concept to the company. My detailed documentation proved it. The client relationships in the pharmaceutical sector, those were personal connections, many from my previous position at Grant Medical Consulting. The strategic framework I created for market analysis that had been copyrighted under my name 2 years ago, with the company only licensed to use it. "You've covered your bases better than most people realize," Marcus said. "Sterling and Associates has a license to use your work, but you own it, and that license agreement has a termination clause." "What kind of clause?" "If you leave the company, they have 60 days to negotiate a new licensing agreement or their rights expire. You made sure of that." I'd forgotten about that detail. 2 years ago, when I'd formalized everything I'd been thinking about leverage for a future promotion. Now it was my exit strategy. By midnight, I had contracts from Thornton Analytics offering me a position as Director of Pharmaceutical Strategy with a salary 30% higher than what Sterling paid me. They'd also agreed to pay a substantial signing bonus and give me equity in the company. But the real work came next. I spent the entire night compiling documentation. Every email where Madison had taken credit for my ideas. Every meeting where my father had dismissed my concerns. Every instance where I'd been passed over for opportunities that went to my sister instead. The time she'd blamed me for losing the Henderson account, when her incompetence had actually driven them away, and I'd fixed the relationship on my own time. The promotion she'd received using my market analysis, which she presented as her own work after I'd shared it in a family dinner conversation. I also gathered evidence of something more serious. 3 months ago, I discovered discrepancies in Madison's expense reports. She'd been billing personal purchases to client entertainment accounts to the tune of nearly $80,000 over 2 years. I documented everything and brought it to our father's attention. He buried it, told me I was being vindictive, suggested I was jealous of Madison's natural leadership abilities. Now I organized all of it into a clear chronological presentation. Not for revenge exactly, for protection, for truth. At 4 a.m, I drafted my resignation letter. It was professional, brief, and gave 2 weeks' notice as a courtesy. I definitely didn't owe them. But I also prepared a secondary document, a detailed account of Madison's expense fraud, along with evidence of our father's knowledge and subsequent cover-up. This version I saved separately. When the sun rose over Lake Michigan, I watched the light spread across the water and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: relief. I got to the office early 7:30 before most people arrived. Security waved me through without question. I'd been coming in at odd hours for years, putting in the extra work that had made Sterling and Associates millions. My desk was exactly as I'd left it. Photos of my college graduation, a coffee mug from the pharmaceutical conference in Boston, where I'd landed our biggest client stress balls from various company events. I packed everything personal into 2 boxes, careful not to take anything that belonged to the company. The resignation letter went into an envelope on my father's desk. The letter for Madison went on hers. Both offices were empty. Madison arrived at 8:15, carrying her usual overpriced latte and chatting on her phone about brunch plans. She walked past my desk without looking, still laughing at whatever her friend had said. The smirk on her face was something I'd seen 1,000 times before, the one that said she'd won again. Then she glanced over and saw the empty desk, the boxes, the bare walls where my credentials had hung, the resignation letter in her hand, because apparently she grabbed both envelopes from Dad's office on her way in. Her face went white. What? I stood up from the conference room, where I'd been finishing some final documentation. Oh, good morning, Madison. I'm just wrapping up a few things. You can't just quit, she said, her voice rising. You're suspended. You're supposed to apologize. Actually, I can quit. I'm an at-will employee, same as everyone else, even if Dad likes to pretend family rules apply here. She ripped open the envelope with my father's name on it, reading quickly. I'd kept my letter brief. Effective immediately, I resigned from my position at Sterling and Associates. Per my contract, I'm providing 2 weeks' notice, though I'm happy to discuss an immediate departure if preferred. I will ensure all transition documentation is complete. I will also be terminating the licensing agreement for the Sterling Walsh predictive algorithm, effective 60 days from today, per the terms of our existing contract. Best wishes for your continued success. You can't take the algorithm, Madison said, her voice shaking. That's company property. It's actually not. You'd know that if you read contracts instead of just signing whatever Dad puts in front of you. My father came through the door already mid-phone call. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw us. I'll call you back, he said, ending the call. Allison, my office, now. I don't work here anymore, so I'll pass, I replied, but I'm happy to talk here. His face turned the particular shade of red I recognized from childhood, the color that preceded his most explosive lectures. You're being dramatic. This is about your sister's feelings, and you're throwing away your career over pride. This is about 6 years of being treated like a second-class employee because I'm not your favorite daughter, I said, keeping my voice level. It's about the fact that Madison committed expense fraud and you covered it up. It's about the fact that I've generated 40% of this company's revenue and I'm still paid less than she is. Madison made a strangled sound. That's not, I didn't. You billed 17 dinners at Alinea to the Henderson account. Henderson went vegetarian 2 years ago and hasn't eaten meat since his heart attack. Want to explain why you were charging $1,000 steaks to his entertainment budget? My father held up a hand. Enough. We can discuss all of this calmly. You're upset, Allison. You're not thinking clearly. Take a few days and we'll work this out. There's nothing to work out. I have a new job. I start Monday. His expression changed then, cycling through disbelief, then anger. You what? Thornton Analytics, Director of Pharmaceutical Strategy. They've been trying to recruit me for 2 years, and I finally said yes. Madison grabbed his arm. Daddy, she can't. Tell her she can't. You have a non-compete, my father said, grasping at straws. You signed a non-compete clause. Actually, I signed a non-solicitation agreement. I can't poach Sterling clients or employees for 18 months, but I can absolutely work for a competitor. Marcus Webb checked every word. Marcus Webb. My father's voice went quiet, which was somehow worse than the yelling. You consulted with an attorney. You planned this. I protected myself. There's a difference. The office was starting to fill up with employees, and I could see people glancing toward the glass walls of the conference room, sensing drama. My father noticed too. Let's take this somewhere private, he said. No, we're done having private conversations where you pretend family loyalty matters right up until Madison wants something I have. We're done with you covering up her mistakes while holding me to impossible standards. We're finished. Madison was scrolling through her phone frantically. The algorithm, Dad. Without Allison's algorithm, we can't. You have 60 days to negotiate a new licensing agreement, I said. After that, Sterling and Associates loses the rights to use my work. I suggest you bring in someone who actually understands predictive analytics to handle the transition because Madison sure can't. The company lawyer, Gerald Howarth, came rushing through the door with his tablet in hand. His usually composed face was pale, almost gray. Tell me you didn't post it, he said, looking directly at me. I smiled. Post what, Gerald? Allison. My father's voice cracked. What did you do? I documented everything. Every email, every meeting, every instance of Madison's fraud and your cover-up. It's all compiled with dates, dollar amounts, and witness statements from employees who were tired of watching her get away with it. Gerald looked like he might be sick. Where? Nowhere yet, I said calmly. It's insurance. As long as my departure is handled professionally, as long as my final paycheck includes my accrued vacation time and the commission from the Phillips account that closed last month, and as long as nobody tries to interfere with my new position, that documentation stays private. My father's smile, the one he'd been wearing when he walked in, died completely. He looked older, suddenly smaller somehow. You'd blackmail your own father. You suspended your own daughter without pay for telling the truth. You covered up fraud to protect your favorite. I'd say we're even, but honestly, I think I'm being generous. Madison's hands were shaking. I could go to jail. You could, I agreed, if that documentation went to the SEC. But I don't want you in jail, Madison. I just want to be left alone to live my life without you taking credit for my work. Gerald was already typing on his tablet. I need to consult with the partners. This is Allison. This is nuclear. This is me protecting myself from a family that never protected me, I corrected. And for the record, Gerald, I know you advised Dad to bury Madison's expense fraud. You might want to consider whether your law license is worth covering up embezzlement. His face went even paler. The office had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching now, not even pretending to work. I picked up my boxes and started walking toward the elevator. Allison, wait. My father's voice had lost all its authority. He sounded desperate. We can fix this. Whatever you want. Name it. I turned back to face him. I wanted you to treat me fairly. I wanted you to acknowledge my work. I wanted you to hold Madison accountable instead of letting her coast on your favoritism. I wanted you to be my father instead of just her father, but you can't give me any of that now. It's too late. Please, Madison said, and for once her tears seemed genuine. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. You realized, I said quietly. You just didn't care. Neither of you did. And that's fine. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. I left Sterling and Associates that morning with my head high and my conscience clear. The looks I got from coworkers ranged from shock to admiring. 3 people actually gave me small nods of approval as I passed. The story spread through Chicago's business community like wildfire. By that afternoon, I had calls from 6 different companies trying to recruit me. By the end of the week, 4 former Sterling clients had reached out to congratulate me on my new position and express interest in working with Thornton Analytics. My father tried calling for 3 days straight. I didn't answer. Madison sent texts that alternated between apologetic and accusatory. I blocked her number. Gerald called once with an offer of full settlement, including back pay for the suspension, a formal apology, and a generous separation package. In exchange, my documentation would remain private, and I'd sign an NDA. Marcus reviewed the offer and advised me to take it. You've won, he said. This is more than most people get. I signed the agreement at a neutral attorney's office. My father and Madison weren't there. Gerald handled everything with the efficient detachment of someone who knew his clients had screwed up badly. The check was substantial, more money than I'd expected, actually. Apparently, the partners at Sterling and Associates had done the math on what my algorithm was worth and decided that paying me off was cheaper than losing access to it entirely. I started at Thornton Analytics the following Monday. Rebecca had cleared my schedule for the first week, letting me adjust and settle in. The team welcomed me warmly, and within days I felt more valued than I had in 6 years at Sterling. My first week there was a revelation. The senior analyst, Derek Morrison, actually asked for my input during strategy meetings instead of talking over me. The CFO, Patricia Holmes, included me in high-level discussions about company direction. When I presented my ideas for expanding into the biotech sector, people took notes instead of dismissing my suggestions as too ambitious. The difference was jarring. I hadn't realized how much I'd been suppressing myself at Sterling, constantly downplaying my abilities to avoid making Madison look bad or threatening my father's authority. Here, excellence was expected and celebrated. Rebecca pulled me aside after my first week. "You seem lighter," she observed. "More yourself." "I didn't realize how heavy everything had become," I admitted. "It's like I was carrying weight I didn't even know was there." She nodded knowingly. "Family businesses are complicated. Double that when there's favoritism involved. You made the right call leaving." But leaving hadn't been without consequences. My Aunt Diane called me 2 weeks into my new position, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Allison Louise Walsh, what were you thinking? Your father built the company from nothing, and you just walked away. Over what hurt feelings?" "Aunt Diane, with all due respect, you don't know the full situation. I know family comes first. I know your mother would be devastated to see you and Madison at odds like this." That hit harder than I expected. My mother had died of breast cancer when I was 15 and Madison was 12. She'd been the glue holding our family together, the one who made sure both her daughters felt equally loved and valued. After she was gone, everything shifted. Dad threw himself into work and somehow convinced himself that Madison, with her outgoing personality and easy charm, needed more attention and guidance than I did. "Mom would want Dad to treat us fairly," I said quietly. "She wouldn't have stood for what's been happening." Aunt Diane was silent for a moment. "What exactly has been happening, Allison?" I told her. "Not everything, but enough. The expense fraud, the stolen credit, the years of being overlooked despite my contributions." When I finished, she let out a long breath. "I had no idea. Your father always spoke so highly of both of you. I thought you were being oversensitive." Everyone did. That was part of the problem. We talked for another hour. She apologized for jumping to conclusions, and by the end of the call, she understood why I'd made the choice I had. But she also made me promise to eventually try to rebuild some kind of relationship with my father. "He's not perfect, Allison, but he loves you. He's just lost without your mother. We all saw how he struggled after she died." I knew that was true, but it didn't excuse 6 years of favoritism and dismissiveness. The real test came 3 weeks into my new position when the Phillips Pharmaceutical Group reached out directly. They'd been one of Sterling's biggest accounts, worth about $4 million annually. The CEO, Richard Phillips, had always worked closely with me on their market strategy. "Allison, I heard you made a move," he said when I returned his call. "Congratulations on the Thornton position." "Thank you, Richard. How can I help you?" "I'll be direct. We're not renewing with Sterling. Your father's been trying to convince us that Madison can handle our account, but we both know that's not true. We want to work with you. If Thornton is interested in taking us on, we're ready to sign." My heart raced. This was exactly what my non-solicitation agreement was designed to prevent. I hadn't reached out to Phillips, they'd come to me. But would my father see it that way? "Richard, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I need to be careful here. I have an agreement with Sterling that prevents me from actively recruiting their clients." "We're coming to you, Allison. That's not recruitment. That's us exercising our right to choose who we work with." He was right technically, but I knew how it would look. I scheduled a meeting with Rebecca and Thornton's legal team. We spent 3 hours going over the implications. Finally, the lead attorney, Sharon Michaels, gave her assessment. "If they approach you, if you didn't solicit them in any way, you're clear. Document every communication showing they initiated contact. Make sure you have emails, recorded calls if possible, anything that proves you didn't violate your agreement." Rebecca leaned forward. "But Allison, even if you're legally clear, this will look bad. Your father will see it as you poaching his clients. Are you prepared for that fallout?" I thought about it carefully. The old Allison, the one who'd spent years trying to keep peace and make everyone happy, would have turned Phillips away to avoid conflict. But I wasn't that person anymore. If we turn them away, where do they go? Probably to Kendrick or Hayes Associates. Either way, Sterling loses them. The only question is whether Thornton benefits from their decision or someone else does. Rebecca smiled. "That's the right answer. Let's bring them on board." The Phillips deal closed within a week. The contract was generous, and they specifically requested that I lead their account personally. When the news broke in industry circles, my phone exploded with messages. 3 were congratulatory from colleagues who knew the account's value. 7 were from other Sterling clients asking about making similar moves, and 1 was from my father. I let it go to voicemail. His message was ice cold. "You promised you wouldn't interfere with our business. You signed an agreement, and now you're stealing our clients." I expected better from you, Allison. Call me back so we can discuss this legally. Marcus Webb laughed when I played him the message. He's posturing. He has no legal ground to stand on. Phillips came to you. You have documentation. If he wants to push this, he'll lose and waste money on legal fees. Should I call him back? Only if you want to. Legally, you don't owe him anything. I didn't call him back. Instead, I sent a brief email outlining the timeline of Phillips's approach, attaching every communication that showed they'd initiated contact. I copied Gerald Howarth Sterling's counsel, so there was no ambiguity. Gerald responded within an hour. Acknowledged. This matter is closed. My father never replied. The Phillips acquisition transformed my standing at Thornton overnight. The executive board took notice, and Rebecca started including me in discussions about company expansion strategy. Within a month, 2 more Sterling clients had made the same decision Phillips had, both approaching Thornton independently after learning I was there. By the end of my second month, Sterling and Associates had lost nearly 30% of their pharmaceutical division revenue. I heard through industry contacts that my father had held an emergency board meeting with the partners. Madison had apparently been demoted, moved to a junior role in operations where she couldn't do as much damage. Part of me felt guilty. Despite everything, I'd never wanted to destroy what my father had built. But a larger part recognized that I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd simply stopped propping it up. The clients leaving weren't following me out of loyalty to Allison Walsh. They were leaving because Sterling couldn't deliver the quality of analysis and strategy they needed without me. That was my father's failure, not mine. The emotional toll was heavier than I expected. Some nights I'd lie awake replaying conversations from my Sterling years, wondering if I'd been too harsh or not harsh enough. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Kim, who specialized in family dynamics and workplace relationships. You're grieving, she explained during our third session. Not just the loss of your relationship with your father and sister, but the loss of who you thought they were. That's a real loss, Allison. It deserves to be mourned. But I chose this, I protested. I left. I knew what it would cost. Knowing something intellectually and processing it emotionally are 2 different things. You can be confident in your decision and still grieve what you've lost. Both things can be true. That perspective helped. I gave myself permission to feel sad about the fracture in my family while still maintaining boundaries. I wrote letters I never sent expressing everything I wished I could say to my father and sister. Dr. Kim suggested it as an exercise, and it proved surprisingly cathartic. Meanwhile, Thornton continued to thrive. My pharmaceutical division expanded from 4 analysts to 12. We landed 3 major contracts with companies I'd never even heard of before joining. The algorithm I developed underwent further refinement with input from the talented team Rebecca had assembled, becoming even more powerful and accurate. 6 months after leaving Sterling, I attended the National Pharmaceutical Strategy Conference in San Francisco. It was the industry's biggest annual event, and I was scheduled to present on predictive analytics in drug market forecasting. The session was packed standing room only with representatives from every major firm in the country, including Sterling and Associates. I spotted my father and Madison in the 3rd row 5 minutes before my presentation began. My stomach dropped. Madison looked uncomfortable. Her usual confidence dimmed. My father's expression was unreadable. His arms were crossed over his chest. I could have panicked. I could have let their presence rattle me. Instead, I took a breath and remembered something my mother used to say. Let your work speak for itself, Allison. Quality always rises. The presentation went flawlessly. I walked the audience through case studies, demonstrated the algorithm's predictive accuracy, and fielded challenging questions with ease. When I finished, the applause was immediate and sustained. Several people stood. My father and Madison didn't. They sat motionless as people filed out, waiting until the room had mostly cleared before approaching. That was impressive, my father said, his voice carefully neutral. You've refined the algorithm significantly. Thank you. I had a team of talented analysts helping me improve it. Madison looked at her hands. Allison, may I? Madison, don't, I said gently. Not here. Not now. My father's jaw tightened. We need to talk about Phillips and Morrison and the Kendrick Hayes account. There's nothing to talk about. They made their decisions. You influenced those decisions. I existed, I corrected. They wanted to work with me. That's not the same as solicitation. A colleague from Thornton appeared at my elbow, rescuing me from the conversation. Allison, the VP for Merck, wants to discuss a potential partnership. He's waiting in the lobby. I excused myself, leaving my father and sister standing there. As I walked away, I heard Madison say something to him, her voice breaking, but I didn't turn back. The Merck meeting resulted in a preliminary contract worth $8 million over 3 years. It was the biggest deal I'd ever negotiated personally, and when Rebecca heard the news, she insisted on taking me out to celebrate. We went to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the bay, and as the sun set over the water, she raised her glass. To Allison Walsh, she said, who proved that talent and integrity always win in the end. To second chances, I countered, and to mentors who believe in people. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely at peace with my choices. 2 months later, Madison called from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Allison. Her voice was small. Dad had a heart attack. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Whatever anger I still carried, whatever resentment lingered in the corners of my heart, it all evaporated in that moment. He was still my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who'd stayed up with me during countless science fair projects, who'd cried at my college graduation. Where is he? I grabbed my keys, already heading for the door. Wait, Allison, stop. He's stable. It happened this morning, but he's out of surgery. They put in a stent. The doctors say he'll be fine with lifestyle changes. I sank onto my couch, adrenaline still coursing through me. You should have led with that, Madison. I know, I'm sorry. I'm not good at this. She sounded exhausted, fragile, in a way I'd never heard before. He's at Northwestern Memorial, room 4127. But Allison, before you come, you should know he doesn't want to see you. That hurt more than I expected. He said that, not in those exact words, but when I mentioned calling you, he got agitated. His blood pressure spiked. The nurse asked me to step out. She paused. I heard voices in the background. Aunt Diane is here. Uncle Rob flew in from Denver. Everyone's asking about you, why you're not here. What did you tell them? The truth. That we screwed up. That you left because we gave you no choice. Her voice cracked. Allison. Seeing him in that hospital bed, hooked up to all those machines, I kept thinking about Mom, how we lost her so fast. And now Dad might have been gone too. And the last conversation he had with you was full of anger and threats. I closed my eyes, remembering my mother's final weeks, the way she'd made us promise to take care of each other, to stay close as a family. We had failed spectacularly at keeping that promise. Madison, you can't put this on yourself. Dad's heart attack isn't your fault. It's not mine either. Sometimes bodies just fail. The doctor said stress was a major factor. The company's been hemorrhaging money. Dad's been working 16-hour days trying to fix everything. He won't delegate. He won't hire help. He's convinced he can solve it all himself if he just works hard enough. She let out a bitter laugh. Sound familiar? It did. My father had always been stubborn, always convinced that effort could overcome any obstacle. It was one of the traits I'd inherited from him, for better or worse. Is he really going to be okay? I asked quietly. They caught it early. The damage was minimal. But Allison, he needs to make changes. The cardiologist was very clear about that. Less stress, better diet, regular exercise, medication. And Dad being Dad, he's already arguing with everyone about it. Despite everything, I smiled. That sounded exactly like him. I'm glad you called, I said softly. Thank you for letting me know. Are you going to come to the hospital? I thought about it carefully. Showing up when he explicitly didn't want to see me would only cause more stress, possibly making things worse. But staying away felt wrong too, like abandoning him when he was vulnerable. Not today, I finally said. Give him time to rest, to process everything. But Madison, if he takes a turn for the worse, if anything changes, you call me immediately. I don't care what he said. Promise me. I promise. Relief flooded her voice. And Allison, I meant what I said before, about being sorry. I've had a lot of time to think since you left, and I understand now. What I did, what we both did to you, it wasn't right. I said nothing, but my silence wasn't angry, just tired. She continued quietly. After you left, I read through some of your old work, trying to understand the algorithm. Allison, I had no idea how brilliant you are. I never looked closely enough to realize. I took everything for granted. You took credit for things that weren't yours, I said. But again, there was no heat behind it. I know. And Dad enabled it. We both know that. She took a shaky breath. He asked me to call you, but I wanted to call anyway, not to ask you to come back. I know that's not happening. Just to say I'm sorry. Really, genuinely sorry. I looked out the window of my new office at Thornton. It was smaller than my old one, but the view was better. And more importantly, I'd earned it on my own merit. I appreciate that, Madison. Tell Dad I hope he recovers quickly. That's it, she asked softly. What else is there? I meant what I said. It's too late to fix what was broken. But I don't wish either of you harm. I just want to move forward. She was quiet for a long moment. "For what it's worth," she finally said, "I told Dad he needs to hire an outside consultant to rebuild the analytics department. And I resigned from my position. I'm moving to operations, something I'm actually qualified for." "That's probably for the best," I said, and I meant it. "Yeah, it is." She laughed softly, sadly. "You know what's funny? I always envied you. Your intelligence. The way you could solve problems I couldn't even understand. I thought if I took credit for your work, people would see me the way they saw you. But all I did was prove I wasn't capable of it." "Madison, you're not stupid. You're just not an analyst. That's okay. Not everyone has to be." Dad never made me feel that way. He always compared us. I know. He did the same to me, just in reverse. He let you think you were better than you were, and he made me feel like I was never good enough. We talked for another 20 minutes. It wasn't reconciliation exactly, too much had happened for that, but it was honest in a way we'd never been with each other before. When I hung up, I felt something shift in my chest. The anger I'd been carrying had burned out somewhere along the way, replaced by something quieter. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it eventually. I never went back to Sterling and Associates. The company struggled for another year before my father finally sold it to a larger firm. He retired early, and from what I heard through the industry grapevine, he seemed content enough. Madison did move to operations, and according to mutual acquaintances, she was actually good at it. She sent me a Christmas card that first year with a brief note, "Thank you for being honest with me, even when I didn't deserve it." I didn't send one back, but I didn't throw hers away either. As for me, I thrived at Thornton Analytics. Within a year, I'd been promoted to VP of Strategic Development. Within 2, I was on the executive board. My algorithm, refined and improved, became the industry standard for pharmaceutical market prediction. And sometimes late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd think about that morning in the conference room. The look on Madison's face when she saw my empty desk. The way my father's smile died when he realized I'd actually left. The moment Gerald ran in, pale and panicked, asking if I'd posted my documentation. I felt powerful in that moment. Vindicated. Justified in every decision I'd made. But the real victory came later. It came in the quiet satisfaction of building something on my own terms. It came in the respect of colleagues who valued my work for what it actually was. It came in knowing that I'd stood up for myself when it mattered most. My father and I eventually resumed a careful relationship. We met for lunch quarterly, talking about neutral topics like the weather and industry trends. He never apologized directly, but he stopped trying to justify his old decisions, which felt like progress. Madison and I exchanged occasional emails, mostly professional updates, and the odd holiday greeting. We'd never be close, but we'd stopped being enemies. That felt like enough. The documentation I compiled, the insurance policy that had terrified Gerald and my father, I kept it in an encrypted file, locked away and forgotten. I'd never needed to use it, and I hoped I never would. Because the truth was, the best revenge wasn't exposure or punishment. It was simply walking away and building something better. And I had. 5,000 miles from that conference room. Confrontation sitting in my corner office at Thornton, with the Chicago skyline spread before me, I finally understood what my mother had tried to tell me before she passed away when I was 15. She'd said, "Allison, someday you'll learn that the people who matter will see your worth, and the ones who don't aren't worth your time." She'd been right. I'd wasted years trying to prove myself to people who were determined not to see me. Now I spent my energy on work that mattered with people who appreciated it. The difference was transformative. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Board meeting in 10. Ready to present the quarterly results." I smiled and gathered my materials. The pharmaceutical division had exceeded projections by 42%, and 3 major clients had signed long-term contracts specifically requesting to work with my team. On my way, I texted back. As I walked through the office, I caught my reflection in the glass walls. I looked different than I had at Sterling and Associates. Confident, relaxed, happy. Sometimes the best stories don't end with dramatic revenge or public vindication. Sometimes they end with you simply finding yourself somewhere better, surrounded by people who see you clearly. And sometimes, just sometimes, all right is the most powerful word you can say, because it means you're done fighting battles that were never yours to win. It means you're ready to walk away from people who don't value you. It means you finally understand that your worth isn't determined by those who refuse to see it. That morning when I said all right to my father's suspension, I'd set myself free. Everything that followed was just the natural consequence of that freedom.